Master Yoda.
Young Skywalker. It is. For you to look past a pile of old books. The sacred Jedi texts. Oh, read them, have you? Well, page turners, they were not. Resistance is dead. The war is over. And when I kill you, I will have killed the Last Jedi.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong. See you around, kid.
All right, love your neighbor as yourself. It involves a lot more than most people are willing to admit. A lot of people like to use the quote, love your neighbor as yourself, as a weapon to basically get you to agree with whatever it is they're promoting. But the love your neighbor as yourself actually has a legitimate, real meaning, and it's a scriptural meaning. It's about the last 6 commandments of the 10 commandments. And today we're going to talk about the 7th commandment, which is, thou shalt not commit adultery. Now, adultery is a very serious sin in the Bible, and we all know what adultery is, but it actually has a lot of applications that is, you found throughout Scripture that you might not know. Here's what the larger catechism has to say about it. It says, what are the duties required in the 7th commandment? The duties required in the 7th commandment are chastity in body, mind, affections, words, and behavior, and the preservation of it in ourselves and others, watchfulness over the eyes and all the senses, temperance, keeping of chaste company, modesty in apparel, marriage by those who do not have the gift of continency, conjugal love and cohabitation, diligent labor in our calling, shunning all occasions of uncleanness and resisting temptations thereunto. I remember the very first time an SJW blocked me. And it was a very weird situation. It wasn't anything that I was saying about race. It was this guy that blocked me. He was a critical race theorist, full-blown cultural Marxist, and I had sparred with him online a number of times, and none of it regarding race or ethnicity or white privilege or any of it, none of that made him block me. But here's what made him block me. It was so shocking to me. He was talking about the infamous yoga pants blog posts that were going on about modesty and things like that. And he was saying how we oppress our sisters when we even dare talk about, modest dress and things like that. And it was of course related to the yoga pants. And so I remember I commented, I said, hey, I'm not for or against yoga pants or anything like that. I'm not saying that a specific kind of clothing is breaking a commandment, but certainly men or anybody has something to say about modesty and dress. That's a biblical standard because we find that in the scriptures. Paul encourages, or rather I should just say commands. Paul commands women to be modest, and so obviously we would have something to say about that. Men as pastors would have something to say about that. And so again, I wasn't taking I have an opinion about yoga pants, but I wasn't taking a side on the issue one way or the other. And that just the idea that men, pastors anyway, should have something to say about that, it's a scriptural biblical thing, that was enough to make him block me. I was shocked. I was like, I don't know how much more mild my comment could have been. I mean, this is just a straight biblical thing, but this is very popular in the social justice movement, to deny even the possibility of immodest dress or effeminate dress even. That's another big one that I've seen social justice warriors take to, where someone will say, oh, that man's addressing in an effeminate way, and the very idea that someone would even say that is enough to put people over the edge. And the reality is, when you say that there is no modesty in standard or in the scripture, and that it's all subjective or whatever like that, that is breaking the seventh commandment. That's one way that some social justice warriors break the seventh commandment. Here's the sins forbidden by the seventh commandment. The sins forbidden in the seventh commandment, besides the neglect of all the duties that are required, are adultery, fornication, rape, incest, sodomy, all unnatural lusts. That's a big one. All unclean imaginations, thrusts, purposes, affections, all corrupt or filthy communications, listening thereunto, wanton looks, impudent or light behavior, immodest apparel, prohibiting of lawful and dispensing with unlawful marriages, allowing, tolerating, keeping of stews and resorting to them, entangling vows of single life, undue delay of marriage. That is also a big one. Having more wives or husbands than one at the same time, unjust divorce or desertion, idleness, gluttony, drunkenness, unchaste company, lascivious songs, books, pictures, dancing, stage plays, and all other provocations to acts of uncleanness, either in ourselves or others. This is a big one. And we just had the completion of the Revoice Conference, which was at a PCA church, Presbyterian church in America, usually solid, should be affirming the Westminster Confession and the Westminster Catechism. That's what the whole PCA is all about. They have standards for these kinds of things. And if you go down that list, you can see very easily, very simply, how the ideas being pushed forward by the Revoice Conference are breaking this commandment. They're breaking the seventh commandment. It says unnatural lusts. That is a breaking of the seventh commandment. But not only that, any unclean imaginations, thoughts, purposes, or affections. All of those things break the seventh commandment. And the Revoice people are telling us, well, as long as you don't have sex, basically anything else goes. You can have a committed relationship. You can be partnered with another man or another woman, and it's totally fine as long as you're just not having sex. And the seventh commandment goes well beyond just having sex. See, I would be breaking the seventh commandment if I were to have an intimate sort of a relationship with another woman, not my wife. I would be breaking that commandment if there were any kinds of thoughts or purposes that were unclean in that way. And so social justice warriors are telling us that that's actually not the case. It's just really, literally only about having sex. So you can be, quote unquote, married to another man as long as you're not having sex. That's just not the case at all, because that kind of a relationship does involve unclean imaginations, unclean thoughts, unclean purposes, unclean affections. And so I know not every social justice warrior is all about the Revoice Conference, but these things are related. If you take one, you basically have no reason to not take the other. I remember when I left, this is not the reason I left the church. I left because we were planting a church. But there was a church I left that was kicking around the idea of ordaining female elders and things like that. And I remember their arguments, the arguments that they put forward for it. And they were using the exact same hermeneutic as the gay Christian movement was using. And I told them, I said, look, you're using the same hermeneutical principles to justify female elders that the gay Christians use to justify gay Christianity. And the only reason you're not going that extra step really is just a prejudice in your part, because you're using the same methods. You would have to apply the same hermeneutics. If you did, you'd get to the same place. And they were very offended by that. They said, well, that's not the same hermeneutics. It's not. And I showed them how it was, and there was really no answer to that. And so the reality is, if you're a social justice warrior and you're not going as far as Revoice, there's nothing logical or reasonable or rational about not making that transition. The only thing holding you back is a personal prejudice, because the Revoice people are employing the very same strategies, the very same logic that you apply to these other issues. And that's the reality. And I think a lot of social justice warriors are just buying into the Revoice stuff. There's no question about it. Some aren't, and I'm grateful that they're not. I'm grateful that they're inconsistent, but they are inconsistent. And so the seventh commandment is a commandment that's absolutely broken very regularly by social justice warriors. And so they're not loving their neighbor as themselves. And that's the reality. So I hope this was helpful. I hope this sparked conversations and some thoughts maybe you haven't thought of ever before regarding the social justice movement. And probably more to come about Revoice and social justice, because again, I'm making the claim that these are very related. They're directly related. They use the same language, the same logic, and I think that's probably worth an explanation rather than just saying it, because I'm not sure it would be immediately obvious to most people. And so there's probably more to come on that. Hope this was helpful. God bless.
When I kill you, I will have killed the Last Jedi.
Amazing. Every word of what you just said was wrong.